Hi, I'm Ashley Raskin, and I am the mom of our son Luca Raskin, who was diagnosed with AML at 4.5 years old. My thoughts on the day Luca was diagnosed was, I think like most people, just utter shock and disbelief. We actually had no idea that he had leukemia. Thinking back to that day, so he had been sick for about a week, a little over a week, with cold-like symptoms that I had suspected developed into pneumonia. My husband was actually deployed at the time, so it was just me with our 4 kids, and I actually went to work that day as a nurse. So my mom was at home watching my kids. Luca also had some really dark urine, and when she had let me know that when I was at work that Sunday, I instantly got worried. I just thought, oh, he's got pneumonia with kidney involvement. That's not good. So I left work early, came home, shoved some food down my throat, and just thought, ugh, we're gonna have to spend the afternoon in the ER. So we get to the ER. Luca did not do well with doctors, hospitals, any of that. And but he did surprisingly well, and I think it's because he just felt so bad. They did a chest x-ray. They noticed his liver and spleen were enlarged. I got a little worried, but they just kind of chalked it up to, infection related, until they pulled me into a room, and I don't even remember what the doctor was saying. It was like she was rambling, and I almost started to internally get angry, and then I could tell she was trying not to cry. And then they started to say his white count was 65,000. And as soon as they got 60 out of their mouth, I knew that it was leukemia. I didn't know a lot about the difference in the types of leukemia, and I guess the significance of those. And that evening we learned that Luca had AML, which is acute myeloid leukemia, and has a lesser prognosis than ALL leukemia. So that was a little, scarier. He was also so sick with the pneumonia, which he did actually have, that we had to delay treatment for a few days to get his infection under control. So it was really just a whirlwind of disbelief and thoughts and emotions and, lack of really preparing that this is our life now. With AML, you live in the hospital. So Luca and I lived in the hospital for 3 to 4 weeks at a time, and then we would come home for 6.5 days, and then we'd be back in the hospital for 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'd only be home for another 6.5 days. And so that was pretty constant until he had his bone marrow transplant a few months later, and then again living in the hospital for 4 weeks at a time. So you don't really have time to process all that. You're just kind of thrown into it, and you have to figure it all out. And then you're just worried. And about a week after diagnosis, we found out that Luca had a subtype of his AML was the KMT2A / MLL subtype or mutation. And that is a very dangerous mutation to have, and is associated with a poor survival rate. So that was very scary. And that was really hard. I was physically sick the first couple weeks that we were in the hospital, just because of all the trauma. So it was just hard. How this all affected my mental health has been very difficult, but I think considering what we've been through, I think that we are doing well. For those of you who don't know, our son Luca did die from his leukemia almost 8 months after he was diagnosed. So we spent 3 months here in the hospital trying to reach remission. He came very close, but did not reach remission. And then we went to Atlanta for a bone marrow transplant. And like 41 or 42 days after his transplant, he relapsed in his spinal fluid. And that was the day that my husband and I started talking about the possibility of him dying. So I think for my mental health, that starting to process that helped me when he did die. Now, he did die a lot sooner than we thought he would. We came home from Atlanta to start stronger chemos, and 4 days after we came home from Atlanta, he got sick with adenovirus, which is a very common childhood virus, cold, and it's very dangerous for transplant patients. He got very sick very quick, and he died within 2 days. So that was very difficult. The last thing I had wanted was, if he was going to die, was for him to die in the hospital or to die being hooked up to tubes and wires. And thankfully, because I advocated for Luca and what I wanted if he were to die, the hospital knew that it was very important for me to have him die at home and, be comfortable. And so they were able to take him home while we spent about an hour with him before he died. Between the trauma of all the anxiety associated with treatment and all the bad news of what if this doesn't work, or okay, this didn't work, what's next, causes a lot of anxiety, and it's hard to work through. I've been prescribed some medication that I think has definitely helped me in ways. I'm also very open with talking about Luca and what he's been through, and just kind of feeling my feelings. So I think that's helped. I also have a great support system. My husband and I have been such a team throughout his illness and then even after his death. And so that, I think, has been really helpful in me personally, my mental health journey and support. Speaking of how to be better supported, I think through treatment, especially with the fear of the unknowns, financial support is probably one of the biggest and forefront thoughts in your mind. Thankfully, there is diagnosis-based Medicaid where we are, and so Luca was able to get Medicaid to, really cover all of his insurance, or all of his, medical costs, even the stuff that our primary insurance didn't cover, or, deductibles. So we had something to pick that up. But then you have the fear of missing too much work. My husband is our primary provider. I did have to quit my job as a nurse because we were living in the hospital. And then my husband, he did have to miss a lot of work, but thankfully his company was so supportive, and we never had to worry about that. when it comes to the amount of support we had through treatment, I mean, it was a plethora of support. You know, you worry about the financial side, your job security, and then, you know, what about my other kids? Who's going to watch them? We had all of that support, and it was amazing and beautiful. But even when you have that support, there is still so much fear of what if it's not enough, because what could come next? And you never know. We had to stay in Atlanta and rent a house. So we essentially had 2 mortgages for a few months. And, you know, thankfully, between insurance and donated money, we didn't have an issue, you know, affording that, which we were really grateful of, that we were able to focus really truly on Luca. But that is a huge necessity for support through treatment, is that financial support, because you're so worried about so many things, and the last thing you need to worry about is money and how am I gonna get by. I mean, what if I was a single parent and had 3-4 children and had to literally live in the hospital with one of my kids? What would we have done? And so I am very thankful for the support that we did have through Luca's treatment. Now that he has died, it's been almost 2 years since he's died, and there are still obviously very hard days. We just passed his birthday last week, Thursday on March 2nd, and the 2 to 3 weeks coming up to holidays or anniversaries of some sort are always very difficult for me, in ways that I can't even explain. I think you really just need the emotional support, and everybody handles their grief differently. And I think others, whether they're involved, like family or outsiders, just have to be there to support the other person in their grief. There's no sense of when are they gonna get over it, because it's always different. Luca's birthday that we just celebrated, he would be 7, and this is his 2nd birthday that we have celebrated without him. And this year was a lot more difficult for me than his first birthday without him, which is, it's weird if you think about it, you know, but grief is funny that way. So for me personally, I don't know if I could be better supported over the past couple of years. I think I have been very well supported between my family and friends and my husband and my kids. But I think one of the most important things is to say their name. And, you know, my biggest thing that I always tell people is we just don't want our babies to be forgotten. I love to talk about Luca, and I can talk about him almost all the time and just be fine, because he's still my kid, and he always will be my kid, and if he was still here, it wouldn't be a thing. So I'm gonna still talk about him as if he is still here, because it's now my job to spread his legacy and you know, just help us to remember our sweet babies, because you know, they are not here anymore and they deserve to be.